Welcome to our explainer on emotion, the inside out journey. We are jumping right into the incredibly fascinating psychology behind, well, why you feel what you feel and why you show it the way you do. We're going to cover everything from those deep gut physical reactions to the complex social rules of the world around us. So let's get right to it. Okay, let's dive into this with a question. When you run into something terrifying, what actually happens first? Is it your heart pounding and your palms getting all sweaty? Or is it your mind realizing, oh wow, I'm in danger? For decades, psychologists have been wrestling with this classic chicken or the egg dilemma. What comes first, the physical arousal or the mental awareness? The answer actually unlocks how we understand the entire human experience. To figure that out, we really have to separate two totally different things. Emotion, which in the psych world is often called affect, is an incredibly complex psychological process, and it is entirely distinct from pure reasoning or just plain knowledge. Think about it. You can logically know a situation is completely safe, but still feel absolutely terrified, right? That's because emotions reflect this massive, complicated mix of internal physical factors and external environmental factors hitting us all at once. It's not just a thought, it is a full-body experience. So, how do we make sense of that experience? Well, let's transition deeper inside the human mind. To unpack our reactions, psychologists rely on theories of emotion. Think of these like blueprints. They help us map out exactly how an external trigger transforms into a full-blown internal feeling. Now, what's really interesting about this next concept is how it maps things out step by step. Let's break down one of the foundational sequential theories. Picture the sequence like this. Step 1 is arousal. Your heart starts pounding. You start sweating. Step 2 is the cognitive label. Your brain steps in, looks around, and says, okay, I'm scared. And then finally, step 3, the actual emotion of fear is realized. This theory argues that, hey, without that initial physical kickstart, the emotion simply wouldn't exist in the exact same way. So let's test that idea of physical action driving internal emotion. Have you ever been told to just smile when you're having a terrible day? Does forcing a smile actually make you happier? It sounds super cliche, I know, but this question actually forms the bridge to a major psychological theory about the physical expressions right on our faces. And that brings us to the facial feedback hypothesis. It suggests that your actual experience of an emotion is directly influenced by your facial expressions. Literally, the act of smiling can trigger feelings of happiness, just like frowning can actually make you feel sadder. This heavily supports the idea we just looked at, that the physiological experience of emotion happens before the cognitive appraisal. Basically, your body does something and your mind follows its lead. Now, to be fair, it's worth noting that research on this specific hypothesis has produced some mixed results over the years, but it beautifully highlights just how unbelievably intertwined our physical bodies and our mental states truly are. And just as our physical expressions can shape our feelings, the actual type of emotion we feel shapes our entire reality. Take the broaden and build theory, for example. When you feel positive emotions, things like joy or intense interest, your awareness broadens. You're encouraged to take new actions, form new thoughts. Essentially, your whole world opens up. On the flip side, negative emotions tend to severely reduce our awareness. They narrow our thinking and restrict our actions, hyper-focusing us solely on surviving whatever threat is causing that negativity. All right, up to this point, we've been looking strictly at the internal journey, how our bodies and minds create emotion. But we don't live in a vacuum, right? It's time to pivot from the internal journey out into the external world. We're now going to explore how social norms and our shared experiences actively dictate the outward expression of all these complex internal feelings. Let's move to this and see how it builds. The outward expression of emotion isn't just some random byproduct of feeling something. It is literally the absolute foundation of all human communication. Long before we had complex spoken language, we had emotion. It's this continuous, non-stop flow of signals that lets us navigate the social world around us. To actually send these signals out, we rely on a massive toolkit. Our facial expressions, subtle shifts in our body language, the rising and falling tone of our voice, and specific verbal cues. Mastering the ability to both express these cues and accurately interpret them in other people is absolutely crucial. It's the core mechanism that helps us establish social connections, build empathy, and truly understand one another. To really grasp the weight of this, consider the words of renowned psychologist Dr. Paul Ekman. He states, emotions are a process, a particular kind of automatic appraisal influenced by our evolutionary and personal past. in which we sense that something important to our welfare is occurring, and a set of psychological changes and emotional behaviors begins to deal with the situation. Really think about that for a second. This automatic appraisal, these emotional behaviors, they kick in instantly. They're shaped by human evolution specifically to deal with situations that impact our welfare. It's this ancient survival mechanism constantly at work in our modern lives. But right here is where the plot thickens. While Ekman's research shows that the core emotions we feel are deeply evolutionary and universal across all humans, the specific way we are actually allowed to show them in public? Well, that is not. Our expressions are surrounded by unseen boundaries, tightly controlled and managed by the society we happen to live in. So the crucial point here is understanding what psychologists call display rules. These are the powerful, totally invisible strings that quietly govern our daily interactions. They dictate whether we should express or suppress an emotion based entirely on our culture. They determine whether it's acceptable to show an intense emotional display or if we're expected to show restraint and hide our feelings. And these rules go even deeper than that, strictly regulating how people are allowed to display emotion based on their gender, their age, and even their socioeconomic class within a given culture. It's wild. Which leads us to a final provocative thought to wrap up today's explainer. If our deepest, most private feelings are universally human, yet the way we express them is entirely governed by these unseen cultural display rules, how much of your daily emotional reaction is truly your own? It's a fascinating question, and one that really highlights the incredible, unseen cultural scripts managing our internal psychological processes every single day. Thank you so much for joining me, and I hope this leaves you looking at your very next emotional reaction in a whole new light.